I didn't check the news, anything like that. And, uh, hey folks, welcome to my early impressions, I suppose, review for The Darkest Dungeon. I've put in maybe 10 hours tops, probably actually less than that, but that's the whole point of early impressions. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not. I already recorded this once, but good lord, was I spazzing out in it. So we're gonna take a second shot at this. Some of the things that you'll pick up from this review, the controls are, I mentioned it yesterday, but they're very rough for using controllers. The touchscreen controls are great. I think they work fine. Everything is where you'd want it to be. Drag and drop and all that sort of stuff works wonderfully on the Switch. But sometimes you're going to want to play this on a television. You're going to want to have it docked. And when it is docked, that is when this game becomes a bit of a mess. Not so much that I would actually say it is bad. This game still squarely in the I like it category of things. I'm willing to put up with rough controls if it means I get to play a very fun game. And this is an incredibly fun game. It's sort of along the lines of XCOM, where you're not going to really have a single group of party members that are going to survive for very long. You're going to make friends and then watch them die terrible, terrible deaths. As with most Let's Players, the screen is telling me to press to continue, and for a while I don't notice it. Admittedly, it's kind of hard to see. You'll catch a bit of just how difficult the controls can be when you first start by the fact that I'm trying to retreat right there on accident. I'm starting to switch my people around. It can be a bit of a mess. You will quickly pick up what you need to be doing. Over time, as with almost any control scheme, it starts to become second nature, but getting there is a hell of a journey. The two major mechanics in this game, at least in the beginning, are one that you should be familiar with, which is keeping your life up, but the secondary one, that's where things get interesting. I don't know what the exact word they use would be, but I'm just going to call it mental anguish or maybe despair. But you have this despair meter that fills up twice. It's those white notches you'll see under my characters. The first 10 notches, so the first 100 points of despair, that will give you a negative quirk once it gets there, or possibly not. There's a chance that when your resolution is tested, when your resolve is tested, that you may come out on top and become a hero rather than some sort of narcissistic or kleptomaniac, something like that. In fact, you'll actually see some of that a little bit later with my Crusader. He's a kleptomaniac, so I can't actually walk by loot. I have to stop and check it out, and he has to take it, which I think is really funny. Something I mistakenly thought was that the items you buy before a mission would get refunded after. I don't actually think that's the case. If you're somebody who's played for longer than me, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in either direction. I mean, one way or another, I'm wrong. I know that much. You may have noticed when the mission first started, I bought a whole bunch of supplies. Again, that's partly because I assumed that was the case. Just now, using that shovel, if I had tried to take that down without the shovel, it would have just destroyed my torch meter, which is that meter you see at the top of the screen. It currently says 1, and it's got 2 notches filled. It fills out symmetrically on both sides, so it's not like one side's coming down and then the other. Matter of fact, the game mentioned right there, but in my hurry to get the recording, I just skipped through it. The lower that meter gets, the tougher your enemies become, but the better your drops become. Currently, I'm not very good at the game, so I try to keep it full whenever I can. You'll notice during this match and future matches that Acolyte, the floating gal in the center on my enemy's team, I try to kill her as quickly as humanly possible because she doesn't really do any physical damage. She moves people around and she causes despair. And so that makes her far more deadly than the regular skeletons that are in here, because if they hit me, my healer, normally if I had her in the right slot, I actually don't right now, she needs to be in the far back slot, but assuming I'm actually playing this game anywhere near close to correctly, I would have her in the back and she would heal most of the damage that's dealt to my team. However, any mental damage that they're taking in, I'm up Poop Creek for that. There's another spec that you can get, or another class, I'm sorry. There's another class you can get that has a dog, and that will reduce stress. And there's also some other spells that certain characters get, and that will reduce stress as well. But it's not, at least when you start, it's not the first thing you get. Now we're just going through. You'll notice that scout mechanic that just happened in the bottom right of the screen where the circles came out. I don't know who causes that or what causes it necessarily. I'll have to look it up later. But what that does for you is it shows you what is in the rooms that are roughly 1 unit away from you, and it shows you everything that is in the hallways along there. And so I know for a fact that in both those hallways there was a treasure. I've already taken one, but you can see down there that just to the right there would have been a treasure. And additionally, sometimes when I scout, you'll see that there's these purple spider webs. That means it's a trap. Super helpful in case you want to skip by the trap. RNG doing me no favors right now. I'm trying to stun the Acolyte because I really, really, really don't want her to be giving me despair. The more you've got on your characters, the less you can use them. Really, you can only use any particular set of characters unless you're exceptionally lucky in the beginning for one mission, and then you need to let them rest in the tavern or the church. And there's all sorts of interesting little limitations for which characters can go in which spots, and I think their quirks, their negative quirks, are tied into whether or not they enjoy certain areas. Like, I had a Crusader who would only rest at the church praying. He wouldn't do any other option, which I thought was kind of funny. But it meant if that slot was taken, I couldn't do anything with him. And apparently you can also fire people and replace them. But I'll be damned if I haven't figured out how to fire people yet. I'm sure if I use touch controls, it'd be a lot easier. But with a controller, it's apparently too complicated for me.
Confidence surges as the enemy crumbles.
Now you heard right there, I wanted to be quiet for a moment. The announcer, I really, really like the announcer. It reminds me a bit of Bastion, where if that announcer wasn't there doing the whole monologue in the background, I don't know if the game would be that interesting to me. Like, it's beautiful, and I love the combat and all the way that the mechanics interweave with each other, but I feel like that voice in the background is sort of what takes the game from being this drudgery of Eldritch horror and makes it this much more interesting, sort of almost campy take on the whole Call of Cthulhu mythos, which I don't know if this is necessarily that, but it's the same basic idea of like tentacled horrors from the void and that sort of thing. If you heard a tap there, that was me making sure I was recording, because you know me. There's a hunger mechanic, as you just saw. When you go to eat, if you don't have any food, you'll start starving, which does just about everything you would expect. Mental anguish, incredible amounts of damage to your characters. It's just not a good place to be. Now we're entering into the last room that we need to reach to finish this goal and then get us to our 90% point. As you can see, I've let the torch run out. This is because I wanted to see if what we're about to fight would be more impressive, and I feel it is. You'll notice we don't have a summoner. However, in the third slot on our enemy side is that pain in the ass goblet douchebag. I don't know what they're called, Bone Courtier. They suck. Once they start splashing your people in the face with their wine, it's just despair goes through the roof. It's very frustrating. I try to kill them or stun them as quickly as humanly possible. But, to my surprise, as I mentioned earlier, HP going down is not really a big deal normally, but in this fight, I'm going to be taking some ridiculous crits. Nobody, well, I guess I'll spoil it for you. Nobody dies. Not this time, but they will. It won't be this round, but maybe the next week of the game or the week after that, somebody's going to die, and it's going to be sad. Now, obviously, as far as the mechanics go, the nuances and the nitty-gritty, I don't really know yet. But as I said near the beginning of this video, I would definitely say this game is in my like it category. And who knows, maybe as I play it more and I learn the mechanics better and I get the controls down, maybe this will fall into the I love it category. I don't know yet. That's going to be a fun little exploration. I would definitely suggest it to people. I hear that it's $5 on the iPad, so if you have an iPad, that seems to me like a no-brainer. That's a Starbucks coffee. It's $25 on the Switch, but I don't feel swindled at all. It's great. I hear from people online that the text is a little bit small on their televisions, but for me, I can read everything, so I mean, I don't have bad vision, but it hasn't come up at all as I've been playing. there's not much else to add. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the video sort of play out, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about indie games in general. Firstly, I want to mention, if you see any green specks in this recording, I should have put this near the beginning, but hey, better late than never. That's from my HDMI cord. I think it's dying, so I'm going to have to switch it out. But, back to the point. Indie games. Even as AAA companies, some of them larger than others, as they sort of move into these shaky, sneaky, nefarious sort of underhanded dealings, it's nice to know that there are teams out there as skilled as this to create sort of an all-encompassing experience that looks great, sounds great, for the most part plays great, although, you know, a little bit of the UI stuff's wonky. And you know that even if the industry were to collapse in terms of the large-scale major productions, that we'd still have indies. We would still have teams of passionate people all over who are putting in the effort to create something truly beautiful. And sure, there's going to be shovelware, but there's always been shovelware. Even before it was actually affordable to make games, you had people making relatively bad experiences. And so I find this very uplifting, ironically, for a game where there's a man on my screen right now wrapped in the deepest, darkest depths of despair. Whew, that was a tongue twister. As I mentioned, you know, here's the stress relief, and you can see that guy filling up the bar slot, so I can't use it. But yeah, I'm gonna give this game quite a bit more play. I want to see if I can finish the storyline, whatever that is, so I can get back to you on that. And who knows, by the time I go to do an official review for this, maybe I will have my little meter ready so that I can do sort of have a little arrow going across a half circle to tell you how I feel about it. Yeah. I think that's basically what we'll end it on. It's a bit of a sharp transition with the music gone now, but what are my videos if not abrupt and poorly thought out? You know, gotta keep consistent.